The Super Mario Galaxy movie was really bad. It's one of the worst video game adaptations that I've ever seen. While the animation is great and the visuals in general are impressive, the story is entirely vapid and uninspired. It's hard for me to describe what the story has to offer because it barely has anything to offer. Most of the plot is focused on building towards the eventual final battle in space and shoving in as many cameos or references they can for the sake of fan service, which does a number on the pacing. There are many examples that I'll get into later. This movie is filled with plot holes and does damage to some of its characters as well. And while this movie tries to be comedic to keep people engaged, I personally found none of the jokes funny, so it made it even more of a slog to get through some of these scenes. And the parts that I did laugh at weren't even by design. I was laughing because the writing was nonsensical, and in a general sense, the movie came across as if it was more so focused on advertising the Nintendo brand rather than telling a good story. So with that said, let's talk about some examples. With all of the characters, there's barely a story with any of them. We barely learn anything about these characters, none of them have arcs, or at least a degree of substance to their writing. The most substantive material we get is with Princess Peach, where she's having to deal with the mystery of her past and learns more about it as the story progresses. But even then, it's executed in a shallow manner. The movie kinda just tells us through exposition how Peach feels about her past, but doesn't really show this through her actions. Without the exposition telling us how Peach feels, you can't actually extrapolate that through anything the movie shows you. And after she says all of this to Mario, this is never touched upon again until Peach remembers her past through flashbacks. And when Peach learns that she was Rosalina's sister the whole time and was sent away to be kept safe, there's barely any follow-up or conversation that happens afterwards. Rosalina says one line while they're hugging and that's it. There's no meaningful conversation about their lives and how much time with each other they've missed, or even a questioning of Rosalina's decisions. It's barely a payoff and there's no takeaway from this part of the story. And to be honest, there's barely any kind of thematic value in the story. Rosalina also has about 10 minutes of screen time, which limits their ability to flesh her out as a character. She comes across as a plot device just so the heroes have a reason to show up when Bowser Jr. becomes relevant. She's basically there to facilitate the final act and the twist with Peach that barely affects her as a character. And the main characters don't meet her until the very end. This is such a strange choice when adapting Super Mario Galaxy, where Mario met Rosalina from the jump. You actually get more from their interactions in that game compared to this movie, which should be more focused on the storytelling. At the very least, Super Mario Galaxy is a video game, and it's not trying to tell a heavy story. Video games are meant for player interaction. You don't have to have a story in these games, because at the end of the day, these are games, and even if a game does have a bad story, if it at least has solid gameplay, then it's still a worthwhile experience, because the gameplay is the most important part of a game. When we're watching a movie, we're watching a story told through visuals. So there's a lot more weight on the story. It matters a lot more when it's a movie, which is why it's such a failing that this movie fails to tell a story that even matches the quality of the Super Mario Galaxy game. Yoshi is also a nothing character in the story. He gets introduced at the beginning, and despite having no clear way of communicating with Mario and Luigi, he very quickly gets used to this and becomes close friends with them. That's it. There's no story told about how they get closer with each other. A better story might have done something with the fact that Yoshi can't directly communicate with them because he can't say anything other than Yoshi. But nothing is done with this. They just have them become friends and move on. Nothing is learned from Yoshi's character, there's no story told with his character, he just exists for fan service, which is a clear example of the larger problem with the story. It seems to prioritize fan service over effective storytelling. Mario and Luigi have basically nothing to offer with their characters. We don't learn anything special about them, outside of the fact that Mario likes Peach. Okay, that's great. Welcome to the basics of Mario lore. Outside of that, nothing is achieved with his character. There aren't any good payoffs with his character because nothing about him is really set up. At most they have awkward exchanges between Mario and Peach, but that's all they are, awkward exchanges. They don't lead to them actually talking to each other about why they're interested in each other or any kind of revelations related to this. At most, Mario just gets a kiss on the cheek at the end, but that's not much of a payoff, and judging by Mario's surprise, this wasn't a product of them actually getting closer. We don't see Mario and Peach getting closer with each other as the story progresses, nor do they have any meaningful conversations that would bring them closer. The first 11 minutes of the movie barely achieves anything. While it's good that they establish Rosalina's connection to the stars, and the fact that she gets captured to kickstart the plot, barely anything is achieved in the story. We learn nothing about Mario and Luigi when they go on this mission to retrieve Yoshi, who we also learn nothing about. We just get a 1-minute montage showing that Yoshi hatched recently and randomly explored the city. I guess Yoshi adjusted well enough to the world in a short span of time, and none of the challenges that would come with that ever come up, which is something we'd expect to see from a well-written character, but that isn't what we have with Yoshi. 12 minutes in, and the story has barely achieved anything. 24 minutes into the movie, we still barely learn about these characters, and the second act is already being kicked off when Peach and Toad go to explore the galaxy when their help is needed. After that, they show a montage of Mario and Luigi protecting the Mushroom Kingdom through a series of fights that reference stuff from the games. This montage doesn't add anything. It doesn't tell us anything about the world that we didn't generally understand. It doesn't tell us anything about these characters or progress the plot at all. It's just fan service. It takes up to the 30-minute mark to have Mario and Luigi finally confront Bowser Jr. The plot starts to move quicker here, but the lack of character building is going to be present throughout the duration of the movie. So even if the plot picks up a bit after moving too slow, it doesn't save the severe lack of character work done. What is the point of following any of these characters if the movie doesn't give us a reason to care about them? You can replace any of these characters with literally any generic characters, and the experience doesn't feel any different. For a brief comparison, I want to bring up Sonic 3 and outline how that movie tackles an ambitious video game story much better than Super Mario Galaxy does, even though the game's story isn't as ambitious as Sonic Adventure 2 anyway. The first 30 minutes already succeed in showing elements of Shadow's backstory and establishing his major character flaws. They're put to the forefront when Sonic and his team confront him for the first time. There's also a scene dedicated to setting up Sonic's arc in this movie about staying true to himself no matter what stands in his way. They also get the plot moving fairly quickly, and the scenes in the movie are actually purposeful and not just fan service for gamers. Sure, it has references to the games, it has a great action scene that is the ultimate fan service for Sonic fans, but it's implemented in a way that's natural and ends up complementing the story instead of interrupting it. That's the key difference between this movie and the Super Mario Galaxy movie. It literally stops the movie just for fan service. It includes characters for the sole purpose of fan service without doing any work for them, which makes for vapid and shallow storytelling. A pretty good example of this is the cameo they made for Rob. Rob is put there solely for fan service, to the point they forced in a joke about how slow he turns just to make the reference last longer, and so they can reuse the drawn-out joke when Mario has to deal with the same thing. It's so clear in the presentation that they're trying to capitalize off the fact that they got to use Rob in the movie. The joke doesn't even make any sense, which leads me to believe that it was artificially drawn out. Why would this advanced robot in this technologically advanced universe have ridiculously slow turns? You'd think this is something they would have fixed by now, since they'd have to test these robots before putting them in the workplace. They then try to introduce Star Fox in this movie, someone I only know through Super Smash Bros. Brawl, so I can safely say I'm fairly neutral regarding his character. As someone who doesn't really know much about Star Fox as a character, this completely took me out of the movie. They went as far as giving him some kind of Spider-Verse-like intro when he's first introduced, just so they can milk another reference to another Nintendo character. Star Fox is not an actual character in the movie, he's just a plot device, and Illumination's way of jangling keys to the audience. He has no real narrative purpose, he doesn't add to the themes of the story, he has no character outside of being a reference to other Nintendo games, yet they spend so much time on him for some reason. You know what Across the Spider-Verse did with their cameos? When Insomniac Spider-Man was on screen, they made a quick joke about it and moved on from him very quickly, and the scene itself serves a purpose of world building, so it actually makes sense to show him here. When Spectacular Spider-Man was shown on screen, he was only shown to represent one of the canon events, and to establish that the Spider People also found it hard to accept the apparent truth behind the canon like Miles currently is. Neither of them overstay their welcome, and they serve a legitimate purpose in the story, even if it's small. That's how cameos are done effectively, without detracting from the pacing of the story. The Star Fox cameo is entirely for fan service. It doesn't contribute to the story. There's also a plot point where Mario and Luigi are turned into babies so they can reference Baby Mario and Baby Luigi. But this, once again, doesn't serve a purpose within the story. It's just another case of vapid fan service. There's no need for any of this in the story, yet it becomes a distraction anyway. For some reason, Mr. Game & Watch is in this movie. He's just pulled in randomly just for the sake of fan service. Luigi barely knows how to use Bowser Jr.'s paintbrush, yet he just conveniently poofs out Mr. Game & Watch. It comes across as so forced and artificial, just to have the cameo in there. That covers a good amount of examples as to how this movie doesn't really focus on telling a story, but rather it focuses on fitting as many references as they can, while they provide at most a bare minimum plot to drive the action and scenarios that contribute to the fan service elements. With that aside, the plot itself doesn't make any sense for the most part. The first glaring issue is during the Yoshi montage, where we see the cops are clearly chasing him and are close enough to keep track of his location. If that's true, they would have gone down the same manhole to search for Yoshi, and they would have found the pipe he went through. Thus, they would have found Yoshi himself on the other side, since he was hiding in the pipe this whole time. We then get a scene where Rosalina is shown to be imprisoned by Bowser Jr., but to briefly escape and free her star child, she uses her magic to break free. I don't know how she was able to do this, since the opening action scene showed that Rosalina got captured and couldn't fight back. So if she was able to fight back with her magic, why didn't she do this before Bowser Jr. left the planet? She would have prevented her capture and the capture of one of her stars. Once Peach goes to space to help Rosalina, the Mushroom Kingdom has everyone freaking out. They're crying, screaming, and attacking each other, and acting in complete disarray. Even though they're supposed to be running the Mushroom Kingdom, and were literally fine with Peach leaving the kingdom beforehand.
I'll leave for the Jungle Kingdom in the morning.
Good luck, Princess. For all our sakes.
So why they're suddenly against Peach leaving the kingdom to help someone is never explained and doesn't make any sense, especially since Mario and Luigi are there to help them. Also, the security for Bowser's prison doesn't make any sense. Bowser can still leave the mini castle he's in, even if he's small. In fact, he escapes precisely because of that. He can run and hide anywhere in the building, and there isn't 24/7 surveillance on him. His only security was Mario and Luigi, who aren't present there 24/7. So why is their security this bad? Why didn't Bowser think to leave the building at any point, like when everyone's asleep? Why didn't Bowser think to jump from a high height so he would take enough of an impact to lose the blue mushroom effect? They established that if you take a hit, you lose your power-up.
When you get hit, you lose the power.
Eventually, Bowser Jr. goes to confront the Mushroom Kingdom. Right off the bat, why have Mario and Luigi not used any of their power-ups? They should have power-ups on them if they're literally supposed to protect the Mushroom Kingdom, yet they didn't use any power-ups against Bowser Jr. Also, Bowser Jr. used a goo attack on Rosalina that covered an area of effect so she couldn't move. So if his weapon is that effective, why didn't he use that same ability on Mario, Luigi, and Yoshi so they couldn't fight back? Also, there's a moment where Luigi and Bowser Jr. are facing off, and Luigi is consistently dodging him. At the last second before Bowser Jr. swings his axe, Yoshi stops him, but Yoshi could have intervened earlier during this encounter. Why did he just stand there and do nothing?
He's just standing there.
Also, we see that Peach's castle is being sucked up by Bowser's ship. If Bowser Jr. can do that, why didn't he do the same thing to Rosalina's home instead of engaging in a useless fight? Also, remember when I showed the clip establishing that taking a hit makes you lose a power-up? Well, Bowser was in the castle when it crashed from Bowser Jr.'s ship, so he would have taken a hit. How didn't he grow large again? I know that he went into his shell, but he's still technically taking hits anyway. But even if his shell would have prevented him from losing his power-up, that makes Bowser an idiot for not taking the hit because he knows that taking a hit would allow him to grow large again. Also, why didn't Bowser Jr. just fly down immediately? He would have caught up to them if he did. They also try to have this semi-redemption for Bowser in this movie, and it blatantly makes no sense. So at first I thought Bowser was obviously not sincere when he claimed that he was going to turn a new leaf. We even see signs that it's probably not sincere when he has his outbursts and is even attacking Mario once he's free, though he's still small at the moment. Now this alone should make it obvious to Mario and Luigi that Bowser, the conqueror who literally took Peach and tried to rule over her kingdom, is not being sincere about changing, but somehow, some way, Luigi actually tries convincing Mario to trust Bowser's change of heart despite how insincere it seems.
What? What are you, stupid? What are you talking about?
It makes no sense for Luigi to trust Bowser, especially since Bowser only becomes big again because he tries to get under Mario's skin, so he tries to slap him. This looks like an escape plan, but to their luck, Bowser isn't trying to escape. They establish that he's so sincere about his change that he's willing to take the heat for Mario and Luigi when they get captured by the Bee Kingdom and get charged for their alleged crimes. And he actually goes into servitude until Bowser Jr. saves him, but even then, he tried to tell his son not to kill Mario and Luigi because they finally got to know each other, when they really didn't. Bowser only became big again because he angered Mario, and his change in heart was before Mario showed a level of respect for him. So all of a sudden, Bowser cares about Mario and Luigi? All of a sudden, he stops caring about an escape plan so he can conquer everyone? Why would he change? Where did this come from?
That makes no sense.
I think it should be impossible to character assassinate Bowser, but this movie somehow did that. And what makes this even worse is how Bowser gets convinced to be a conqueror again. They establish that he left his son to boarding school so he can go be a conqueror. So when his son tries to finish what he started and tells him to do just that, alongside the fact his followers are cheering for him, he's suddenly ready to become a conqueror again? It's really strange that someone he neglected and barely cared about was enough to shift his perspective. Not to mention that Bowser is fine with killing his own supporters as shown in the first movie. It makes me wonder why he even bothered to change at all, if all it took was someone he often neglected to tell him to be himself again, and a following that he clearly sees as beneath him. He's also out of character in the final fight. He's fine with breathing fire when Peach is directly in the crossfire, when his whole obsession is with Peach. I guess he's fine with killing her now all of a sudden?
That makes no sense.
So instead of killing Mario and Luigi because Bowser suddenly grew a conscience, Bowser Jr. decides to shoot a weapon to turn them into babies, and instead of keeping this weapon that he clearly thought was of value, he randomly tosses it off the ship just so they have a way of reversing it. I don't know why he did that, outside of the plot requiring them to become adults again. Also, Yoshi for some reason tries swinging over to the weapon when he finds it stuck in a tree, when his tongue should be long enough for him to grab it, and when he lands on a tree branch, he tries to balance his way there instead of just taking it with his tongue. He wouldn't have to deal with the dinosaur if he did that, and during that fight, Yoshi allows himself to fall down when he literally has a tongue he can use to save himself from the fall. We eventually get the full reveal as to why Peach and Rosalina split up years ago, and the plan that Rosalina has reminds me far too much of how stupid Richard Parker was in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Rosalina was afraid that their power would be used for evil because of some vague threat that they barely explained, so instead of going into hiding with Peach when she shares the same powers, she decided to leave Peach alone with the Toads and stay in her world, I guess. Why do you need to split up in order to prevent bad people from using their powers and to protect Peach? All they need to do is just hide from them in order to protect Peach. Not to mention that Rosalina can help protect the Mushroom Kingdom in order to protect Peach. And once Peach establishes a public reputation as a princess, what's stopping Rosalina from visiting her? She's clearly fine with sticking around at the end, so I don't see what's stopping her when she was fully grown and leading a kingdom. And I don't see why Peach doesn't have a problem with this either, or at least ask these basic questions that would come up. Also, during the final act, Mario and his team are clearly fine with sending the stars to go fight Bowser and his army. It's clear that they're willing to kill and conquer, and the stars are meant to represent the children in Rosalina's home. Why are literally all of them okay with sending children to a war zone when they already have their own skills and power-ups to fight against Bowser and his army, like they did in the first movie? Like, that's just completely messed up, and the movie seems to think this is fine. Nobody in the movie questions this. I also want to question the mechanics behind the paintbrush that Bowser Jr. uses. Apparently, Luigi can accidentally create Mr. Game & Watch, who's able to contend with Bowser. So, if you can just create constructs like this, why doesn't Bowser Jr. simply create an army of them to stop Mario and his team? This would very easily overwhelm them. Bowser Jr. later creates a construct of a dragon, and for some reason it attacks Bowser Jr. himself. Now, I assume the reason Mr. Game & Watch went after Bowser and his son is because it intuitively obeys its owner, which would make sense. But if that's not the case, then why didn't Mr. Game & Watch attack Mario and Luigi as well? At the end of the movie, we see that Rosalina and Peach are able to create a healthy environment out of a war zone by simply combining their powers. Now come to think of it, if they can just create healthy plants like that out of nowhere by simply combining their powers, can't they literally solve world hunger? Why is this never brought up? Why don't they ever try this? This ability comes with some serious implications, and it makes it even worse that Rosalina didn't try to meet with Peach when she could have. Then the movie ends with them all figuring out that the castle is destroyed. So in response to this, they create a construction project to rebuild it, which includes all of the star children that live with Rosalina. So I guess child labor is allowed in this world and that's the way they want to end off the movie? Sure, whatever, I'm past trying to understand the story by this point. Now I typically don't include this in reviews, but for some reason, I've unironically seen Nintendo fanboys freaking out over people simply being critical of this movie to the point that I've seen posts like this. Like, come on, are you serious right now? It's one thing to say to ignore the negativity just to have a fun time, because it's totally fine to separate entertainment value from a critical assessment, and trying to enjoy movies this way is perfectly fine, but that's not what this is saying. This is saying, fuck movie critics for even criticizing the movie at all. Like, what? That's just ridiculous, and I shouldn't have to play a video game to appreciate the movie. A movie should stand on its own and provide its own value as a story. That's not what this movie does, and this is coming from someone who has grown up with Mario games and has loved playing the Galaxy games. This is what I mean by Fanboy Defenses. It's literally telling you to stop criticizing the movie, and it's insulting you for doing so. I've also seen people say that it's a kids movie, so people shouldn't be criticizing it this much, which is such an odd thing to say when great works have been made while having a young target audience. Kung Fu Panda 1 and 2, How to Train Your Dragon, the Spider-Verse movies, and Sonic 3 are great examples of movies that are geared towards children, some of which are adaptations as well, that manage to deliver well-written content. If they can do it, so can the Mario movies. If I can defend those movies without appealing to whether or not they're for children, then why can't the same be done with the Mario movies? And I know some people are gonna ask me this, so I might as well say it right now. Yes, this is worse than Five Nights at Freddy's 2. It's easily worse, because at least that movie seemed like it was trying to tell a story. This one seemed like it was advertising Nintendo products. This story made no sense and provided very little of value. It's already a stale, vapid movie, and it's not going to age well over the years. With that said, I have nothing more to add. Thank you all for watching this video. I'd also like to thank my friends PJ and Sir William for helping out a bit during the scripting process, and be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you all later. Goodbye.